Life has a way of throwing you off course, which is why I don't bother planning anymore. Before my divorce, I was all about planning at work. I'd planned for all possible emergencies in my department and have backup plans ready in case the main ones didn't work. Today, I got a call saying I needed to see my ex. I hadn't seen my wife in over a year and wasn't looking forward to it, but my daughter Sammy was really persistent, so I drove back to town. It took me almost an hour to get through the busy freeways to the city hospital where Sammy had taken her mom. I parked and hoped I wouldn't be there long at the information desk. I learned my ex-wife was in the hospital. My wife Erica had been in the hospital for 2 days. A nurse took me to her room, but said she was still asleep. I asked what was wrong with her. My wife started to answer, but I interrupted, saying ex-wife, very ex-dash. My wife was smiling at the nurse, who smiled back but then looked serious. My daughter said, "Dad, are you flirting with the nurse while Mom's in the hospital?" I said, "Of course not." I glanced at the nurse, Bonnie, who said, "Ooh, that name suits you." I said, "My daughter," and then pushed me into her mom's room, breaking our smile. The room had 4 beds and was the most depressing place I'd been in, whether in a hospital or anywhere else. "This room is terrible, isn't it?" I just shrugged my shoulders. "Dad," she said, "she's here because she doesn't have health insurance. Darren can't add her to our plan. The only person who could is Sammy. I love you more than anyone. I do almost anything for you, but you've got to get." Sammy said softly, "Dad, I know you did everything the judge said, but not everything she wanted." We stood by the bed and looked at the sleeping woman. She never wanted a divorce. "You know," Sammy said quietly, "she still loves you even now. People in hell want ice water." I said coldly, "But they're down there for what they did. Your mom and I are divorced because of what she did when we were." Sammy said, "I know what she did. I was there, but I can't help but feel you two still belong together. She loves you so much. Dad, look at her. She's falling apart. Some people don't age well." I said, "Maybe she needs to take care of herself. She needs her husband." Sammy said, "She needs love and care. That's why she's wasting away." "You woke me for this." I said, "Who's her husband? Do you know? Can you show her some compassion, Sammy? You don't know what it's like. I put up with her for years, gave her chances, but she couldn't let go. Dad, don't you want to settle down with someone and enjoy life?" I did. I gave her chances. I loved her enough to put my pride aside and try to fix things, even after I found out what she was doing, but she couldn't. "Let it go. Some women can love 2 men at once," Samantha said, "and some men can handle that." I replied, "But not me. Why am I here anyway? I've been here since we brought her." Samantha said, "I needed a break to go home, shower, change and to see my husband, Darren. He sat with her yesterday, but he doesn't like Mom. He used to until I stopped. 3 families are almost destroyed because of 2 messed up people." I said, "Maybe they belong together. Don't you have any compassion? Sometimes I can't find my heart." I snapped. She tore it out. "Didn't you already get your revenge?" Samantha asked. "You've crushed her spirit. What more do you want?" "I didn't get revenge. I said I walked away." "I still don't understand." Samantha said, "You're not the type to walk away. There's so much I don't get in these 2 years since the divorce. Like I asked, we split everything except the house. It just didn't make sense. She said my mom didn't want any of that stuff, she just wanted you. It just seemed like you guys should have had way more money than you actually did. My mom's lawyer went over all of our finances." I shrugged. "So, why are you driving a customized Mustang that my husband claims cost at least $50,000? When Mom can't even afford a car?" she asked. "Maybe my credit is better." I said, "Anyway, I'll sit here and play games on my iPad while she sleeps for a few hours. I'll give you a break, honey. Hopefully she won't wake up. If she does, I'll call you immediately. What's wrong with her anyway?" Dad, Mom has been diagnosed with severe depression symptoms. She's actually on medication for. We don't know why, but she took all of her pills at once. We had to have her stomach pumped. She hasn't been eating the way she should and she's been drinking too much alcohol. She's exhausted and dehydrated. We still don't know whether she took all of the pills by accident or if she was trying something. So the chances are she probably won't even wake up right. I asked, smiling, Dad, if she does, please be nice to her for me, okay? I will, he replied. Sammy kissed me on the cheek and left the room. I sat down in the chair next to the bed and got out my iPad. I started out opening the book I was reading, but quickly lost track of it as my thoughts wandered back to 2 years ago, when this had all started. Eddie, do you remember when? When Sammy was little, she liked making odd mixes of candy. I love her so much that I'd eat whatever she made and say it was great. Once she invited us over for dinner. It was nice, but Samantha still couldn't cook. The roast was super dry. Darren kept refilling my drink, probably knowing the roast wasn't good. Luckily, I don't drink much or I'd have been drunk. It was great to catch up with the family. I got to hang out with Samantha's son, John, who was named after me. He was adorable and couldn't do anything wrong in my eyes. The highlight was when Sam and Darren told us she was pregnant again. Darren, what are you doing to my daughter? I joked that we discussed the usual topics when our kids are expecting. We all like the name Elizabeth if it's a girl after Darren's. I suggested Peter for a boy after Darren's dad, which he liked. Then things took a turn. You already have a grandkid named after you. Erica said, let someone else pick this time. What do you have in mind? I teased, let me guess. Erica for a girl. Eric for a boy. Well, actually, I was thinking Randall. She said, we could call him Randy, Randall, James, Dylan. The mood changed. Samantha suddenly looked at me. I could tell she wasn't sure about that. She said she preferred my dad's suggestion. Darren hadn't looked at me yet. He was still smiling, thinking about his dad being happy with a grandkid named after him. He just nodded. Erica reached for my hand, but I pulled away sharply. Samantha hadn't noticed my reaction. She asked me what I thought in a cold tone. I replied that I thought naming him that would be as big a mistake as the one your mother just made. Have you ever seen one of those scenes in the movies or on TV where everyone is at a party having a good time? There are people dancing, music playing, people eating and drinking and laughing everywhere. Then someone does something really stupid and everything just stops. Everyone's heads turn towards them. The music usually stopped and you could hear a sound like the needle scratching on an old record. Well, it was like that for what seemed like an hour, but was probably no more than a few seconds. No one said anything, then Darren broke the silence in a diplomatic way. He looked at his watch and said, I really have to get to bed. I've got an early meeting tomorrow, thanks for a great evening, Darren. I said I love you, Sammy, then I got up and headed for the door as I was opening it. Samantha called me Dad. What is wrong with you? She asked. Aren't you forgetting something? Well, come on over here and hug me, Sammy. I said I have to get out of here. I can't even breathe. I was talking about Mom. She smirked. I thought. Darren, you didn't drink, right? So, what have you been filling my father's glass with all night? It's Pepsi, I said, although right now I could use some liquor. What is wrong with you? John asked Erica, coming over to me. She reached out for me again, and this time I moved away from her so everyone saw it. We're going to talk about this when we get home, honey. She said we aren't doing anything. I got really annoyed. I'm going back to my house. I have no idea what you're doing or where you're going, but it's not with me. Wait a minute, Dad said. Samantha, you're mad at Mom because she didn't like the name you came up with. Erica's eyes widened because she suddenly knew that I knew. No, I said. I'm not mad or angry at all. I've just finally. Sometimes the people you love do things that hurt you, and you just let it go. Sometimes you suffer in silence because you think that if you just get past this one thing, you can go on and things will be better in the end. But then something happens that shows you've suffered and made allowances for nothing. Some things just can't be let go of. Everyone in the room was looking at me except Erica. She already knew what I was talking about. Dad, you're not making any sense. Erica had fallen to the floor and was silently sobbing. Both Samantha and Darren looked at her. I'm so sorry, John, she said. It's over. It's been over for more than 5 years. I've been trying to be the best wife possible to you. Why did it end? I asked because I felt so guilty. She said, I knew that what I was doing. I made a mistake, so I ended it. Can't we talk about this? It wasn't an affair. We only got together once a year, and we didn't even always have Z. After I came home, you and I always had the best Z we've ever had. It's been over for a long time. I love you, John. We need to talk about this. You don't understand. This isn't as simple as it seems. I know it seems bad, but it's worse than you think, Erica. I snapped. Maybe when the divorce is final, you'll tell someone the truth, but I'm sick of you lying. What do you mean, she said. I admitted it. If it was up to you, Erica, you'd still be seeing him. I said I told you I ended it. She snapped, and you're lying again. I said I ended it. She asked if I had met him in Boston 5 years ago. I said I had beaten him up. He was in hospital before your cheating colleague had even got off the plane. I took his phone and got all your texts. I'll probably use them as evidence. I also told him who I was and that the next time he came anywhere near you, it would be his last day on the planet. I told him that if he ever tried to contact you for any reason, even just for friendship, I'd be back, so you didn't end anything. Erica, I did. John, I'm sorry. She said she was wrong, that she was confused, that it was a mistake. I'm sorry too. Erica, I said I was wrong too. I was confused too. I made a mistake too. I was wrong to try to save this messed up marriage. I did it for Sammy though. I didn't want her to have to deal with us splitting up until she was out on her own. I was confused too. You see, I thought that maybe in time, since I loved you so much, we could get past it. I made a mistake. I should have ended this far sooner. I really tried to make it work, but at least you were right. You did end it when you uttered his name tonight. I ended our marriage when I walked out of the house and drove away. I spent a long time that night just driving around. The sound of my Mustang's engine and the thrill of speeding through the moonlit night helped to take my mind off things. I turned off my phone so I wouldn't be disturbed. I wasn't as upset as it seemed. I'd known about what she'd done for over 5 years, and for that whole time I'd been preparing for the divorce in more ways than one. Erica was probably more shocked by tonight than I was. First, because she had no idea that I knew about her affair. Second, because she only found out that night why it had ended. She'd flown to Boston for a conference she'd attended every year. She got a room in the hotel she always stayed in. The conference was a 1-day seminar. The day-long seminar that she always told me was 2 days long. After the conference ended, she had dinner with Randall. They sat there in the restaurant talking to each other until it closed. She even mentioned me a couple of times. Then, when the restaurant closed, they exchanged a very nice kiss. Randall went out to the parking lot and got into his car to drive home. As he was leaving, I was sitting on the hood of his car. Hey, that's my car, I said. I'm sorry, he replied. I didn't mean to bother your car. It's wrong for people to bother things that don't belong to them, isn't it? I asked. I agree, he said. Let's not talk about it. Hubcaps, Randy, let's talk about Mary, your wife, who is waiting for you at your house on Sycamore Street. It's probably too late for me to go over there and talk to her right now. I should probably wait until tomorrow to visit her. I'm calling the police, said Randy. He pulled out his phone and tried. Randy, you can call the police anytime you want. It'll be my word against yours, and either way, you'll lose. The fact is, you've been spending time with my wife Erica while your own wife was waiting at home for you. We'll come out on top in the end." His face went pale. "I'm not the sharing type of guy, Randy. I think you've made a mistake. I know Erica, but we haven't spent any time together." He looked at me and saw how serious my face was. "Okay, we had dinner together tonight. Some of the things we learned at the conference were interesting. We both wanted to talk about them with someone, but that's it. Nothing happened. We just lost track of time. I said you had me worried." He smiled at me like he was glad we cleared everything up. I punched him in the face as hard as I could. He went down like a bowling pin. Then he got up and I started running, through his hubcap and caught him in the legs. He tripped over it and fell heavily again. I pounced on him and started beating him mercilessly. When I was done, his face was a pulp. "You really had me worried, Randy," I said. For a moment there, I really thought that I wasn't going to get to. "I know you only had dinner tonight, but this has been going on for a while. Maybe 15 or 20 years. He sputtered through his busted lips. "It's over, Randy. I want to make it clear that your marriage and your life are at risk." He nodded again. "Don't visit her. Don't write to her or call her. I'll give you one more chance." He nodded again. "I got it. The next time we talk won't be this pleasant." I got back home and Erica was her usual self. She tried to kill me with lovemaking, but I just didn't go for it. Usually, after she came back from the conference, we'd go on vacation together. That year, I pretended to be too busy to get away. Despite my efforts to move on, I couldn't. A big part of my brain was still there. Judas Priest mode. Okay, most of you don't know what I'm talking about. There's a heavy metal band called Judas Priest. Arguably, their best album was the one called Screaming for Vengeance. That's how I felt. I tried as I might, but I couldn't calm down. I wanted blood. I wanted someone to pay for my pain. Misery loves company, so I thought I'd find someone to be miserable with. I got Randy fired through some business connections I had. I didn't tell him it was me who did it. I just knew I felt great about it. I had no regrets. It gave me the same warm glow I once got when I did something nice for Erica. I got the same warm glow I got when I did something nice for Erica when I did something evil to Randy. I've spent the last 5 years ruining his life. I was sure that divorce for Erica and me was inevitable. Why didn't I confront her and file for divorce despite what she'd done? I still loved her, deep down. I really wanted to believe her and give her another chance, but my head told me to be prepared for anything. I told Erica that we were under a raise freeze at work when I actually got a raise a few months later. I'd been working towards a promotion for the past 10 years. After all this time, my promotion was finally mine. I didn't tell Erica my salary nearly doubled. I diverted most of the new income into accounts that she knew nothing about. 2 years later, I got another promotion and another raise. I told Erica nothing about what was going on. The reason behind all of this deception was that if we got divorced, she'd have no idea about my actual income. She'd really believe that I was still making 40 grand a year, so that's what our divorce would be based on. My boss had been through a similar situation, so he saw no problems in helping me officially on the books. I was listed as a mid-level manager. I was a level manager, and no one outside the company ever asked why all the other managers deferred and reported to me. It just seemed like the way our company ran. About 3/4 of my actual salary was regularly paid to another company that looked like one of our vendors. I wasn't one of that company's officers, and I didn't own it. All of the officers of that company were fishing buddies of mine. In exchange for the usage of their names, I took them fishing once or twice a year. They were all listed as volunteers, so there were no salary or tax implications for them. The money from that company went directly into my offshore account. I kept the account open, so there was no way of tracing it. On a couple of occasions, I did withdraw some of the money. Once was after Samantha and Darren got married. I put a large down payment on their house to help them get started in their marriage without a lot of financial stress. I didn't buy the house for them outright. I put enough down that their regular mortgage payments were under $100 a month. The other time was to buy Sam and Darren a second car since they both worked and their jobs weren't in the same part of town, so it just made things easier for them. I also had to be careful when giving the kids their gifts. The way I gave them the house and the second car actually worked in my favor and allowed me to give Erica even less money. The money for the house came from me pulling it out of my retirement package, which meant that in the case of a divorce I'd have next to nothing in my retirement. I had to get Erica to agree to the car, so I took out a loan to cover the cost. This meant I had less money to give her, but it was worth it. One of the benefits of my situation was that Randall worked in manufacturing. He was an inspector. My company also manufactured castings, and we owned a lot of direct-to-factory manufacturing concerns all across the country. I had a PI friend who lived in Boston, and I'd have him regularly check on Randy whenever he got a new job. I'd also talk to one of our account executives if we had an account with the company Randy worked for. One of my friends had lunch with someone who worked there, and Randy got fired. If we didn't have an account with Ree's new company, we got one. Then Randy got fired. I kept a spreadsheet on my computer that was dedicated to keeping track of Randy and all of his misfortunes. Some of them I didn't even cause. After a while, Randy's reputation in the manufacturing community was so bad. He even had trouble getting an interview for a job just before Randy passed away. His last jobs were in landscaping or day labor. His misfortune had also taken its toll on Ree's marriage. His wife had gone back to work to help support the family. I never touched her or her career because I had nothing against her. I also did my best to make sure that Randy's kids got everything they deserved. I helped his daughter get into law school. I set up a scholarship just for her and gave it to her. The scholarship ended the year she got her degree. The full amount was put into an account. She never found out where the money came from. She got good grades and got bonuses during her time at school. Her mysterious benefactors gave her bonuses. It was tough on Randy. He wanted to support his family. He wanted to be self-sufficient. He found that he was neither hurt nor diminished in pride. He started drinking and over time became obsessive about it. He never became violent or abusive towards his wife or daughter, but towards the end he was only a shadow of the man he once was. I also looked at the changes my actions brought about in me. I too was no longer the man I'd been when I first discovered my wife's cheating. I had always been a soft-spoken, easygoing guy. I'd been open and honest for most of my life, but the trauma of discovering when I looked in the mirror, I saw a man who had been betrayed by the woman he loved. I didn't see a psychopath who could calmly and with relish plan and oversee the systematic destruction of a man whose only mistake had been to have sex with the wrong woman. I still saw myself as John Forrest, an all-round nice guy and family man. In the old days, all of the bad guys wore black hats. Maybe I should trade my Mustang in for a black one, but even as I'd been wondering about all that, and I just couldn't stop myself. My heart was shattered, and I needed revenge more than healing. My soul was screaming for vengeance, and forgiveness just wasn't an option. Even as I watched Ryan's life fall apart, I watched Erica. I found that I simply didn't trust her. It's a terrible thing not to have faith in the woman you've pledged to love and cherish forever. That's one of the effects of her affair with Randy. It destroyed not only our marriage but my ability to trust anyone completely. I was in that situation for a full 5 years. While I was dealing with Randy, I was also watching Erica and preparing for my divorce. Unlike most men who have a few days or maybe a few weeks to try to protect their assets, I had 5 years to prepare. I originally planned for more than that. Erica had been through a lot. When we divorced, I still thought she was pretty decent looking. I'd planned to wait until she was on the full downswing, but Randy hadn't been able to keep going for as long as I thought. I'd hidden and squirreled away as much money as I could for 5 years. I didn't need to worry about the house. We lived in that house because it wasn't ours. It had been in my family for generations. We lived in it because my parents, who were still alive, didn't need a place that big. When I went through the divorce, I made sure the lawyers knew that my parents owned the house and that I was simply allowed to live there. When Erica came back from the conference, she texted Randy about how much she'd enjoyed their dinner together and how wonderful the kiss had been. She also told him that she missed the times when they'd made love, but she was glad that she hadn't done it this year. She'd always felt guilty about being unfaithful to me, as she was sure that Randy felt the same way about his wife. She told him that what they had now, their zest romance, was actually better because they could enjoy their relationship that way until they both died with no guilt on either side. Maybe they were getting older and their love didn't need to be expressed physically, just being together was enough. That way, they'd be together forever. She ended the text with "Until next year, my love." I read that text as I was waiting for my luggage at the airport. I felt like strangling Erica. I still loved her in some ways, but my feelings for her had changed drastically. It was hard for me to hold it all together when Erica got home. I was sitting in the den watching a football game. She came in and wrapped her arms around me and tried to kiss me. I moved away from her and told her I had a cold and didn't want to make her sick. "Just make sure we're better by this weekend," she said, smiling. "Why? What happens this weekend?" I asked. "You and I are going off on we could go on vacation together." She said, "We always go after my boring conference, but maybe you could do a mother-daughter vacation and take Sam this year." I said, "I really can't get away from work this week, but honey, it's the weekend." She whined, "You'd really only miss 2 days of work. Think about it, 4 nights and 3 days in Hawaii, it would be just the two of us. We might never leave the hotel room. I bought all kinds of new things to wear for you." I wondered how many of those things Randy would have seen if they'd met up earlier. "Erica, we're under a wage freeze and the company is trying to cut costs wherever they can. I have to make sure that they never get the idea that I'm one of the costs they could cut." I said, "I understand, honey." She said she'd go call Sam. "I want you in the bedroom 10 minutes after I get upstairs." Then she went up the stairs and I heard her talking to my daughter, Samantha. She was also texting Randy again, wondering whether or not he'd received her previous text. It just disgusted me when she didn't come to bed. She came looking for me. I went over to the couch and pretended to be asleep. Over the next few weeks, I came to terms with things. It was a big adjustment. I became a far better actor than I ever thought I could be. We still had sex more or less as regularly as before. As often as before, I don't know if Erica enjoyed it as much as I did, but I sure did. I didn't have to concentrate on pleasing her anymore because I just didn't care whether she got off or not. I had to look at things from a totally different viewpoint. I started thinking about Erica as my wife, and I loved her. I just saw her as some woman I was sleeping with. Our ZX was raw and less loving, but at the same time, it was more adventurous. Erica had always been kind of vanilla when it came to sex. During the guilt period, just after the conference, she needed to assure me that she was mine. She rarely refused me anything. I started sleeping with her like that. It was the first time for us, even after all of those years of marriage. Erica couldn't protest and tell me that she wasn't the kind of woman. Who did that? She was the next year when conference time came around. I watched her closely, looking for any sign that she was in contact with Randy. I checked her phone account online to make sure that she hadn't received any calls from the Boston area. She hadn't received any, but she'd sent several texts to Ryan's phone. She was getting more and more frustrated that Randy never answered her. She tried calling a few of her friends who also knew Randy and found out that he'd had a run of bad luck. She found out for the first time that he'd been beaten and robbed following the conference the previous year. He'd also been fired and no one knew where exactly he was working. She'd sent him several texts asking him to simply meet her for dinner at her hotel, but none of them were answered. Her final attempt came when she'd got one of her friends who knew Randy to go to his house and tell him that she wanted to hear from him. Randy had told the friend that he didn't remember her and since he no longer worked in the industry saw no reason to contact her, especially since he wasn't attending the. Erica was really upset. She said she didn't feel like going to the conference this year. I told her she needed to go. She always goes, so she should go this year too. This year shouldn't be any different to last year. What's different? I asked her straight up, even though I already knew my flight landed 2 hours after hers. I watched her all day and almost messed up. Erica didn't even stay the night. She flew back home at the end of the day, while she was heading for the airport. I called her and told her how much I missed her and that I had to go out of town for the evening. She said it didn't matter since she'd be at her conference. She said she couldn't stand us being apart and that she was flying home early. I guess I expected her to try to hook up with another guy, but she didn't. She just went to the lectures and the expo. As soon as it was over, she flew home. The following year, she tried to get me to go to the conference with her so she could show me how boring it was. After that, she simply stopped going for the last 2 years. Erica has been completely faithful to me. I have occasionally either watched her myself or even hired a PI for a few days. She hasn't done anything to arouse any suspicion. If I didn't know any better, I'd have thought that she was the perfect wife. The problem was that once trust is gone, things will never be the way they were before. So when we sat out on our deck and relaxed in our big swing together, I always wondered if she was thinking about Randy and how their love would last. Until one of them died, when she woke me up on a Sunday morning by doing me, I always wondered if she was imagining doing it to Randy. As a result, I was never able to give Erica my heart totally again, no matter how romantic she tried to make things. I always looked for an ulterior motive. For the past 5 years, Erica has been simply a maid with benefits, and a very expensive one. In the 2 years before the divorce, I looked at her body often. Sometimes I felt like a farmer inspecting his crops. Yeah, her. Her breasts are starting to sag. I'd notice it won't be long now or I'd see a few more lines on her face. We're getting there. I'd say, Erica, honey, I'd tell her to have another piece of cake, but she'd say, I love you. I'd tell her it didn't matter. She'd smile, hug me or give me a peck on the cheek, which was all I'd allow. She was sure that I meant that no matter how fat she got, that I'd still love her, but I meant that it didn't matter because I was sure that our marriage would be over soon, so she could eat a cow or look like one, and it wouldn't matter to me. Our life was good on the surface. We had friends that we did things with and we spent a lot of time with our daughter and her husband. Things were good for years. I actually believed that Erica had almost forgotten about her affair or that she'd thought she'd gotten away with it after all. 5 years is a long time if nothing had been discovered after all. Did it still matter? A couple of days before the I had a dinner with one of my colleagues in Boston who told me that Randy had been fired from his latest job in the fast food industry because of his drinking. The manager wouldn't let Randy work inside the restaurant, so he was taking care of the landscaping around it for minimum wage. He shoveled snow and cut grass. On other days, he had to wear a costume that made him look like the restaurant's clown mascot and spin a sign that invited passing drivers to eat in the restaurant. Randy had fallen pretty far in the 5 years he was now in his late 40s. He was a college graduate who worked for minimum wage, dressed like a clown, and hawked burgers. He was one of the few people who worked at the restaurant who had a college education. The other workers were all 18 or younger. They used Randy as an example of why going to college was a waste of time. One kid told his mother right in front of Randy that she'd come to make the kid quit working at the restaurant because his grades in high school had been slipping. What's the point? He asked her. Even if I graduate and you and Pop spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on me going to college like your parents probably did back in the last century, how do we know that I won't end up back here in that clown suit? I've already spent thousands of dollars on college, like Ryan's parents probably did back in the last century. How do we know that I won't end up back here in that clown suit? Ma, I'm better off than he is right now, and I haven't even been to college. At least I work inside the restaurant and I make more than minimum wage. If I go to college, I might make even less. As I've said before, Randy had once hearing the kid's sermon on the state of his life drove Randy further into depression. Randy was so distraught that he didn't pay attention to where he was flinging his sign. Some of the observers said it was on purpose, while others swear it was a freak accident. Randy threw the sign up in the air and it came down on a customer, shocking her and knocking her bag of food out of her hands. Her hands, she started yelling at Randy, and he went berserk when the police arrived. He was still kicking one of her hamburgers down the street as if it was a street hockey puck and calling her names. Randy was fired on the spot. He got his last check and used it to buy himself a bottle and a rope. He went home and, before he started drinking, used his college degree one last time. He was in manufacturing technology and he made the best noose he could. He climbed up onto a chair and started drinking with the noose around his neck. As he drank, he thought about all the good times and mistakes in his life. He thought about his career and how it had gone downhill. He thought about his daughter and how she no longer respected him. He thought about his wife and how they used to be a couple that everyone they knew envied. Now she barely tolerated him and they slept in separate bedrooms. It wasn't the changes in Randy's career that had doomed his marriage. It was the way he handled each successive failure. They'd just been pulling further and further apart over the years. Part of it was that Randy was always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Randy died without ever realizing that it had been me all along who was ruining him. He thought it was just bad luck. I'd always intended to tell him one day that it would have been my final stroke of vengeance, but I never got the chance. The last thing that Randy thought about before drinking himself into a stupor, losing his balance and dying was Erica. He traced the beginnings of his bad luck to his. He was never honest enough to admit that he'd had an affair with a married woman. He blamed all of his bad luck on Erica. His bad luck started when Erica's husband discovered them and beat Randy so badly he was hospitalized. Everything went downhill from there and never stopped. His last thoughts were a wish that he'd never met her, and his last words were about her too. Ducking which he thought as the alcohol in his system caused his brain to shut down his consciousness. When I wake up I'll figure out some way to get back at her. Ryan's wife came home and discovered the body. It was sad that she couldn't even come up with enough emotion to cry. She was glad for him because her husband had really suffered. In recent years, he was finally able to move on. He was beyond his pain and suffering. One of Erica's former colleagues, who knew her and Randy, had emailed her to tell her about his death and how it had come about. She called her to get all of the details about the last few years of Ree's life. Erica was shocked. I'd heard from my contact before Erica was notified, so I knew to expect she was definitely off her game. I watched her and couldn't tell if it was because she'd lost someone close to her or if she was just thinking about how short life is. That night, she held on to me like she was worried about losing me. She even cried a little when I asked her why. I guess I was expecting her to say something like that. She said she'd lost a friend from her past, but it wasn't like that at all. She told me she loved me and was glad to have me. She said she didn't know what she'd do if anything ever happened to take me away from her. I know it. I'm a sucker, and she got to me one last time that night. The second round was different. We made love like we always used to. I did things for her. Instead of having sex with her like I usually do, I spent a long time just kissing her, holding her and letting her know that I loved her too. I stupidly believed that I was healing and that I could trust her again. It was as if over the past 5 years a scab had finally formed over my wounded heart. The next night, as we had dinner with Sammy and Darren, I held her hand as we ate and we gave each other longing glances. Samantha even asked us why we were still so much in love after all these years. Then Erica had to go and ruin it all by trying to get Samantha to name my grandson after Randy. Things were never the same after that. I'd spent years preparing for the moment when all of this came to pass. I realized then why I'd never been able to do enough for Randy. I'd done a lot for Randy over the years, but it hadn't been enough. I'd been unloading a full clip into him and then reloading it and emptying it into him again. The problem was that Randy alone hadn't been responsible for my pain. In fact, he'd been the lesser of the two evils. Randy hadn't promised before God and all of our friends to love, honor and cherish me all the days of his life. That had been Erica. In fact, before I'd confronted him in Boston and beaten him up, I hadn't known Randy at all. What I had done for the past 5 years had been bad. It had been shameful and, More than anything else, it had been cowardly. It was as if I had been a normal. I was a typical high school student, and one of the big guys on the football team had pushed me down. I got revenge by running across campus and beating up one of the chess team nerds. I was pretty angry, and Randy did deserve a bit of it. Erica deserved more in the days following the dinner. Erica tried to come home, but I wouldn't let her. I told her I'd give her all her clothes and personal items that I'd packed for her the first night she called. I said I wouldn't speak to her other than to tell her that I thought this coming Saturday would be a good day for her to come over to the house and take any furniture or appliances she wanted. I suggested she bring our daughter and son. I'll get back to you on that. I suggested that she could call me to verify that the items she took were not against my wishes. I told her that I'd be gone all day Saturday and that I'd come back Saturday evening when she called to tell me she'd done it. When I pulled into my driveway on Saturday, it didn't quite turn out that way. When I got home in the evening, Arika was still there, along with Samantha. They wanted to have a chat with us. "John, I love you. I love you with all my heart. I would never intentionally hurt you. I'm sorry. I'm sorrier than you think. I believe you're pretty." I said, "I've never seen a more sorry excuse for a wife." "Can we talk about this?" she asked. "We've been together for almost 30 years. We can't throw all of that away over something that happened and ended a long time ago." "John, why didn't you confront me about this when you found out? I can only imagine how much pain you've been carrying around with you for the past 5 years. I'm beginning to understand a lot of things now. I understand why there's been a wall between us for the past few years. This is the reason, isn't it?" I sighed and nodded. "That last night was so wonderful." She said it was the best sex she'd ever had. "We've never had this kind of thing before. I bet you thought that Randy had died and that this was all behind us until I opened my mouth." I nodded again. "John, can you let me talk? I really need to get this out of my system. I know that what I did was wrong, but it's been over for years. I know that you ended it. I have a few questions I'd like you to answer when I'm done, okay?" "Erica, I don't have to listen to anything I said. I could throw you out of here right now. I'm going to let you have your say, but only for one reason. I want to get this divorce over with and wrapped up as quickly as possible so I can move on with my life. My life, if I listen to you now, you'll have had your say, so you won't be able to go to the courts and tell them that I never gave you a chance to talk about things. So start talking, but first there are a couple of things I'd like you to explain while you talk. When did this start with Randy and why?" "Is 2010. We got married in 1980, so I guess it started in 1982. She said, "So this has been going on for 28 years. I was shocked. I had no idea it had been that long. "I guess you and Randy saw it differently. Maybe he only counted it from when you started sleeping together." I looked at Samantha, and she looked at me. "Her mother, John, there's no way Samantha is anyone's child except yours. She said the conference is in July. Samantha was born in January. It's just not possible, but you kind of hoped, didn't you?" I spat. "Don't tell me that the possibility of it never crossed your mind." Samantha looked at her mother. Her expression was pretty grim. "Sammy, Angel, I love you more than life itself. For the past 5 years, you've been the only person I could trust completely, and most of my heart is yours, baby. But could we do a DNA test? It doesn't matter now, in the least. I'll never treat you or my grandkids any differently. I need to verify this." I said, "John, I already told you." "You," she said. "I've always loved you. You just don't understand." "Well, start talking." I told her I'm giving you time to make me understand, but you need to give it everything you've got. This is the last time we'll be speaking without going through lawyers. "John, you're not serious." She said. "I only cheated on you once, and that was years ago. It isn't worth throwing away 30 years together over the past 5 years. You haven't seen or heard from Randy. You're punishing me for something that ended a long time ago. I think that's unfair. You're not thinking straight. I know you haven't. I said, "You know I haven't." What, she asked. "I know you haven't. It's been 5 years since you've seen or heard from Randy. You did try to contact him 4 years ago, though. The year after the last conference you spent together, you tried to find out when he'd be arriving at the conference for your yearly get-together, but he didn't answer any of your texts. You tried to get in touch with him through the friends told you that he didn't remember you. He did, but he was afraid. He knew that if he answered you, I'd either beat him completely to death this time or, even worse, tell his wife and ruin his marriage. So you know that it's over," she said, smiling. "How do I know that?" I asked. "The last thing you sent to him. I believe there was a text message from years ago where you told him that your love would last until one of you died. It's barely been 5 years, but he is dead now, isn't he? Then again, maybe you weren't lying after all. You did love him enough to try to get Sam to name my grandson after him, even though it cost you our marriage." "No, John, you don't understand," I said. She said, "You and I had only been married for 2 years when I went to that first conference. I met Randy there and he was the nicest guy. I missed you a lot. It was the first time I'd ever been away from you. I kept leaving the lectures to try to call you, but you were working. Randy and I started talking and he made me feel at ease. He was similar to you. The following year, we met again and got even closer. We even had dinner together and talked for hours until we were asked to leave the restaurant. I never wanted to stop talking to him, but you have to understand that a lot of it was because he was so much like you. We hadn't been together for that long. Sometimes I needed to run things by someone to see how you'd react to them. It wasn't until the 4th year that we slept together. It was an accident. We'd both gotten really drunk and ended up in bed. We woke up the next morning. We were both really guilty and couldn't even look at each other. We didn't even say goodbye. The next year was the 5th year. We kind of avoided each other, but I missed my friend. I was pregnant with Sam that year, so unless it took a year for Samantha to come to term, there's no way. We didn't even have dinner or talk that year. The next year he came over and told me how sorry he'd been about everything that had happened 2 years prior. He blamed it on himself and told me that he thought it was stupid for us to avoid each other because of a mistake. So we had dinner and talked it through. To be honest, I'd been avoiding him for over 2 years and fantasizing about what it would be like to sleep with him. We'd both been drunk and I wanted to remember what it had been like. So at that point it had been 6 years and we'd only slept together once, and then it had been a drunken thing that year. The following year, nothing happened, but there was this weird tension between us. It had started to seem like we only went to the conferences to see each other, year 8, just to break that tension. We ended up having sex. I feel the most guilt about that one for the past 3 years. I'd been avoiding him. I was fantasizing about what it would be like to have sex with Randy. It was awful. It was worse than awful and it was boring. You already know that sex isn't really about size, but Randy's equipment was not really your equal in terms of dimensions. And worse than that, I guess Randy had been with his wife for a very long time. He knew exactly what she liked, but it wasn't the same as what I liked. I realized then that I'd made a mistake. The next year, I avoided Randy again. I didn't just avoid having dinner with him or having sex with him. I avoided him completely. I basically hid. I did go to his house, though. I went over to him towards the end and said I'd just run into him after looking for him for a long time. I asked him a lot of questions about his wife and then left. The year after that, John, we'd been going to that conference for 10 years. Randy was waiting for me at the airport. He kept telling me about how special that year marked 10 years of friendship. It was like our anniversary or something. I ended up giving him a mercy sleep and suffering through it because I didn't want to hurt his feelings. He really was a nice guy. I said he was so nice that sleeping with him was worth more than your own. John, you have to understand that he was a lot like you. I didn't want to hurt his feelings, and it only happened once a year. There was nothing wild or strange about it. It was like an older couple's extramarital affair. Look at what you and I do. There was no comparison. Randy wasn't experimental. It was more like romantic sex without the romance. I've never given him a blowjob and he's only been in one place, if you know what I mean. Erica, you don't understand this either. I said you and I started getting experimental after I found out about you. Think about it. I let you give me a blowjob, but I don't do you anymore. I'm not sticking my I didn't let my mouth anywhere near his body, and I started sleeping with you because I wanted to have something that Randy hadn't had. I also wanted to hurt you and make you do something you didn't want to do. A few nights ago, you said that the time we just had was the best sex we ever had. You and I haven't had sex since. We didn't have any romance or intimacy. I was just sleeping with you like I do with other guys. You were just there and available. She looked a little disappointed, so for the next few years I just got through it. I knew that every year I'd look forward to being with Randy at the conference. He was a great friend, and though I dreaded it, I knew that I'd have to endure having sex with him at the end. A few years later, I started making excuses. One year, I was on my period. The next year, I put up with it. The following year, I claimed that I had a yeast infection. The year after that, I was on the rag again, so I went about 3 years without having to sleep with him. Then we'd do it, and I'd skip a few years. The year that had ended, we hadn't slept together in 4 or 5. For years, he always talked about it like he really loved having sex with me, but it was like pulling teeth for me. He was my friend and I liked hearing how much I cared for him. We often told each other we loved each other, but I never really felt or meant any of that. I just didn't want to hurt him, so you chose to hurt me instead. I snapped. How are you hurt? She asked. It had gone on for over 20 years. In that same 20 years, you and I probably had sex literally over 2,000 times. I love them all, no question. I had sex with Randy maybe 8 times at the most, and I hated every single time. I can't even remember if it was a case where I put Randy ahead of you, but even if it was, I could understand it. But that never happened. I love you too much for that. This was a once-a-year thing that happened so far away from where we live that no one who knows us would have been in the vicinity. There's no way that you've been embarrassed by this, and even the year that you beat poor Randy up and ended it, it was already ending on its own. You know about my texts to him, so you probably also know that we had spoken at dinner about how much better things were that we weren't having sex, just enjoying each other's company. That relationship would have ended on its own soon anyway. I was never going to have sex with him again. That's what I meant by we were better without the guilt. I was just trying to let him down easily. I figured that the relationship would naturally drift. John, I know you don't want to believe me, but I love you. I love you more than anything. I made a mistake with Randy a long time ago and I didn't know how to get out of it. You and I have a lot of history together. Please don't throw it all away. I sat back and looked at her, trying to process everything she'd said. I was still angry, but I could see the pain and sincerity in her eyes. This was the woman I'd loved for decades. She was the mother of my child and my partner in life. But I know it was a big mistake, Erica. I get that you regret it, but you still betrayed me. You betrayed us every time you met with him and every time you said you loved him. You took something away from us and destroyed I'm trusting you. I'm trusting our marriage. I can see you're sorry and maybe even understand why you did what you did, but I don't think I can ever get past it. She was crying as she listened. John, please, she whispered. I will do anything to make this right. Anything, just. Please give us another chance. We can go to counseling and work through this. Don't end our marriage over something that's been over for so long. I shook my head. It's not just the affair, Erica. It's the lies and deception for 28 years. You've kept this from me for 28 years. You made me believe our marriage was something it wasn't. You took away my ability to make an informed decision about my own life and whether or not I wanted to stay with someone who could do that to me. You robbed me of that choice. She sobbed uncontrollably, and Samantha reached out to comfort her. Samantha said, Dad, please. Mom has made mistakes, but she's trying to make it right. Can't you at least try to work through this for me and the grandkids? I looked at my daughter, the pain in her eyes mirroring my own. Sammy, I love you. I love you more than anything, but I can't just forgive and forget this. It's been eating away at me for years, and I can't live like this anymore. I can't keep pretending that everything is okay when it's not. Erica tried to speak again, but I held up my hand. Erica, I don't want to hear any more. You've had your say, now it's time for me to move on. I'm filing for divorce. You can take whatever you want from the house, but I need you out of here by the end of the week. Dad, please, Samantha begged. Don't do this. I'm sorry, Sammy. I said, my voice breaking. But this is something I have to do. I can't live with this betrayal any longer. Erica collapsed into a chair, her body shaking with sobs. Samantha knelt beside her, trying to console her. I stood up and walked out of the house, the weight of years of betrayal and pain pressing down on me as I drove away. I thought about all the years we'd spent together and all the memories we'd made. It hurt to think that it had all been tainted by Erica's affair and her lies, but I knew that staying with her would only prolong the pain. I needed to find a way to heal and move forward with my life. I spent the next few days getting my affairs in order and making arrangements for Erica to move out of the house. Over the next few days, I got my affairs in order. I filed for divorce and made arrangements for Erica to move out of the house. Samantha tried to talk to me several times, but I couldn't bring myself to discuss it further. The decision was made, and I needed to focus on the future. The day Erica moved out was a bittersweet moment. She took only what she needed, leaving behind many of the things we'd accumulated over the years. As she walked out the door for the last time, she turned to look at me. Her eyes filled with sorrow. John, I'm so sorry, she said. It was a bittersweet moment. She took only what she needed, leaving behind many of the things we'd accumulated over the years as she walked out the door for the last time. She turned to look at me, her eyes filled with sorrow. John, I'm so sorry, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I said, I'm sorry, but that's not enough. Goodbye. She left, and I was alone in the house that had once been filled with love and laughter. I knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but I also knew that I needed to find a way to rebuild my life and find peace and happiness once again. Over the next few months, I focused on myself. I threw myself into my work, spent time with friends, and even started dating again. It wasn't easy, but I began to heal. I realized that while Erica's betrayal had been devastating, it didn't define me. I was stronger than that and could find happiness again. Eventually, Samantha came to terms with the divorce. She still loved her mother, but she understood why I couldn't stay. Our relationship grew stronger as we supported each other through the difficult times. In the end, I found peace in knowing that I'd done what I'd reclaimed my life and my happiness. The scars of Erica's betrayal would always be there, but they no longer controlled me. I was free to move forward and build a new future, one filled with hope and possibility. 5 years have passed since I finally walked away from Erica. I've spent those years rebuilding my life, but the pain and betrayal still echo in my mind. Especially after the shocking revelation that Samantha isn't my biological daughter. The truth came out during a heated argument with Erica about the divorce settlement. In a moment of desperation, Erica blurted out that Samantha was Randy's daughter. A paternity test confirmed it. It was devastating. The girl I had loved and raised as my own was not biologically mine. The betrayal cut even deeper. It was the final straw. Despite everything, Samantha stood by her mother. Samantha stuck by her mother, and I couldn't understand why I was so set on moving on. It was like a knife in my heart when she chose to support Erica after everything that had happened. In the end, I decided to remove Samantha from my will. It wasn't an easy decision, but I felt I needed to take control of my life and my legacy. We split our possessions 50-50, with Erica taking half of our savings and some personal items. I kept the house, but it felt empty without the family I once thought was mine, so I sold it and moved into a modern apartment in the city. The transition was hard, but I found solace in my work and slowly began to date again. It was during a business conference that I met Lisa. She was a breath of fresh air, intelligent, kind, and genuinely interested in me. Lisa had her own successful career as a marketing executive. Lisa's life story was refreshingly free of the complications that had marred my own. She'd been married once before, but her husband passed away in a tragic accident. Despite her loss, she remained optimistic and full of life. We started dating, and for the first time in years, I felt alive again. Lisa had a way of making me forget the past and focus on the present. Her presence in my life was like a healing balm, slowly mending the wounds that Erica's betrayal had left. While I was finding happiness again, Erica's life took a turn for the worse. After the divorce, she moved into a small. She tried to find a job, but her depression and guilt got the better of her. She started drinking heavily and her health deteriorated rapidly. The weight of her actions and the loss of her family took a severe toll on her. Erica's attempts to reconnect with Samantha were met with limited success. Samantha was supportive of her mother, but couldn't fully understand the depth of her mother's actions. The strain between them grew and Erica felt increasingly isolated. She tried to find solace in alcohol, but it only pushed her further down the spiral. Eventually, Erica lost. Her job ended up on the line, and she ended up on welfare. Her once vibrant appearance faded as she fought her demons alone. I heard from mutual friends that she had been in the hospital several times due to alcohol poisoning and severe depression. It was heartbreaking, but I couldn't bring myself to reach out. The woman I once loved had destroyed too much of my life, and I needed to protect my newfound happiness. Despite her best efforts, she couldn't save her mother from herself. She had her own family to care for and the burden of her mother's decline weighed heavily on her. The rift between us remained, but I found peace in knowing that I had done what was best for me. Lisa and I got married last year. Our wedding was small and intimate, attended by close friends and family. It was a day filled with love and hope for the future. Lisa has been a constant source of strength and joy in my life. We've built a new life together, free from the shadows of the past. Looking back, I realized that the years of pain and betrayal were a necessary journey to bring me to this point. I've learned that forgiveness isn't always about the other person, it's about freeing yourself from the chains of the past. I may never fully forgive Erica, but I've found a way to move forward and embrace the happiness I deserve. Erica's downward spiral is a tragic reminder of the consequences of betrayal and the importance of honesty in relationships. For now, I focus on the life I have with Lisa, grateful for the second chance at happiness that life has given me. I forgive Erica, but I can't forget what she did. I found a way to move forward and embrace the happiness I deserve. Erica's downward spiral is a tragic reminder of the consequences of betrayal and the importance of honesty in relationships. As for Samantha, I hope that one day we can rebuild our relationship, but for now I focus on the life I have with Lisa. I'm grateful for the second chance at happiness that life has given me.